All right, what's going on, guys? Simple Sports back on a Wednesday. Another episode coming at you. And as I've been saying for the last 2 days, we're going to talk about LeBron James and this whole legacy thing. This little video I've been teasing now for a couple of days. So, basically, what I want to talk about is, and I posted this on Instagram and Twitter, and had a couple of people I talked to and interacted with that looked like LeBron James fans, and some of them just went way in the left field, started talking about Michael Jordan and all this other stuff, and I don't really know how they interpreted that from what I said. I in no way was I comparing LeBron to MJ or anything like that, or saying he wasn't a great player. My post simply said, I'll let you know why LeBron James' reign is over and why it's his own fault. That doesn't take away from his greatness at all. So I don't know why people tend to go that route anytime you say anything that could be remotely interpreted as negative. And that really isn't negative. It's just to what I believe is a fact. So let's get into it. And maybe that'll change some people's minds. I had a couple of people, like I said, just went off about that in the comment section. And I don't know, it's just really weird because I didn't mention MJ at all or LeBron James being a bad player. In fact, I've said many times he's one of my favorites. He's a great player. But hey, let's get into it. And before we get started, I want to get one thing straight, okay? And I've said this is sort of the theme of my brand as well, but it's also, I want to be clear to reiterate that with this video. This is purely from a fan's basketball perspective, and this whole brand is about that. I try to make that clear. I'm not an insider. I'm no analyst. I'm no professional. I'm purely, simply a fan of sports who likes to talk about them and give his opinion on them. And occasionally they may be way out of bounds. They may be out of left field, because they're uninformed in the sense that I'm not in the locker rooms. I don't have insiders. I don't have sources. So I don't want it to come off that I know. These are purely my opinions and the things that I believe as a fan, way out on the distance, way out on the horizon, looking into things. I don't know what it's really like, obviously, but I can tell you what it looks like to me. And, with that said, these are the questions that I want to discuss today. Why, number one, did LeBron James leave the Cavaliers initially? Why did he choose to go to Miami? And what happened while he was in Miami? And how did him being in Miami and winning 2 rings in 4 years, going to the finals 4 years in a row, how did that affect the rest of the league? And how did the league become affected once he went back to the Cavaliers? Okay. So first of all, why did he leave initially? There are a few reasons to me. For one, he didn't feel the Cavs were doing all they could, or didn't feel it was enough. Maybe they were doing all that they could, but it just wasn't enough. Whatever the case may be, those are the 2 main reasons, I think, from the outside, again, looking in. He was trying to win a ring and didn't feel the team around him was good enough. For 2, and again, I wasn't there, so I can't speak on any details. But he didn't see eye to eye with Dan Gilbert. There was some tension there. Enough said. For 3, it's Miami. I don't know how you turn down living and playing in Miami. Enough said there as well. He also went down to surround himself with better talent and to maximize his potential of winning a ring. And I want to tell this whole thing as a story, so just follow along with me. I'm going to try to make this video a little bit shorter, so just follow along. The noise was being heard, especially after the first finals loss in Miami to the Mavericks, after the not 1, not 2, not 3, and he came up kind of small against the Celtics. And, he got swept by the Spurs in 07, so the noise was there, right? He hadn't won a ring yet. He had won a couple of MVPs, but no rings. And he was being hailed as this all-time great player with really nothing to show for it through 8 years, except for, I think he had 2 MVPs by then. Maybe just 1. I don't remember for certain, but I know he had at least 1, maybe 2, by the time his first year ended in Miami. And I went back and looked up just a few of the headlines from June that year after they lost the finals, 2011. One says LeBron James choking. The numbers say yes. Another one says LeBron James isn't the first to shrink in the finals, which is true. But again, they're talking about the fact that he came up small. LeBron James choke job from a quitter or poor coaching. And again, that's just three. Those are just the first three that I came across on Google after doing a very, very quick search. My point is, it didn't just start in that year. It was an ongoing narrative. LeBron James can't get it done. He's LeChoke. He's LeBrick. He's mentally fragile. And I think a large part of him going to Miami with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh was also, man, I got to get this monkey off my back. I can't leave my legacy with that label. You can't come in self-proclaimed the chosen one and the king and all of that stuff and then not actually do anything with it. You just can't do that. And if you think about it, he was going on 9 years without a ring, and yet tons of people were already crowning him an all-time great. And there was blowback and pushback against that from the media and fans and analysts and whoever else, especially after they lost to the Mavericks. All right. So the first thing I want to address is, why did he go to Miami? There was a hump to get over, right? And this is where things start to get interesting. The Boston Celtics were that hump at the time. And who, if not for Miami, would have probably gone to another finals or two in 2012 and 2013. But they lost to the Miami Heat. LeBron needed help to beat the three-headed monster known as the Big Three, and they were sort of the original Big Three, at least as we remember it, right? There were quote-unquote super teams previously, but of course, with today's narrative and media and social media, everyone jumps to conclusion. It's like a big cycle. Everyone gets relabeled, and it kind of cycles through over and over again. So the Celtics were the quote-unquote original Big Three. And so the dominance began from Miami, and for 2.5 years at least, because they lost in 2014, but most people believe that they would win the title. So for 2.5 years, the first year, you had to see what was going to be, what was going to become of it. So let's not count that. The 2.5, or just call it 3 years after that, it looked like they were going to make good on the promise, right? Not one, not two. Like, they won the first one against OKC in pretty convincing fashion. And then they squeaked out what a lot of people would label as a lucky championship against the Spurs due to the Ray Allen shot in the corner. But what happened was there was another giant out on the horizon. That was the Spurs. The Spurs, really, if it's not for the Lakers for a couple of years, might have been one of the better teams in the West, might have come out of the West a couple of years. And they had their own Big Three with Ginobili, Parker, and Duncan. And then now a young star in Kawhi Leonard. I say now, but I mean now at that time. And in 2014, the Heat got obliterated off the floor. LeBron found himself, kind of ironically, in 2010 all over again, in almost identical situation to Cleveland. He didn't see eye to eye with Pat Riley, didn't feel like the team was good enough to keep winning, and he packed his bags and he left and he went back home. So let's focus on what happened to the rest of the league, right? The rest of the league was gearing up to face LeBron James and the Miami Heat. He had stacked the deck so heavily in his favor, teams were trying to respond. For 4 years, it was a foregone conclusion in most people's eyes that the Heat were going to win the title, definitely going to make the finals. And similar to Golden State now, for the last 3 years, 2 years, I guess, if you don't want to count the first year that they sort of just became what they were. But for the last 2 years, at least, everyone has felt, it's a no-brainer. The Warriors are going to win the title. And so over the past 4 years, including this year, including this team, right, what we have seen are two things across the NBA. We've seen 3 to 4 really good teams, viable championship or at least finals contenders, right? You've had Cleveland, Houston, Golden State, and the Spurs. OKC, a lot of people thought prior to this year starting, they would be included in that mix. But those were the 4 teams: Houston, Golden State, San Antonio, Cleveland. But think about all the super teams that were formed from the time LeBron left or his last year in Miami to the time, to currently. And this isn't all of them. These are just the notable ones, the ones that people thought could compete for titles. You had the Brooklyn Nets with KG, Paul Pierce, and the rest of those guys. You had the Lakers with Kobe and Dwight, Steve Nash. You had the Clippers with CP3 and Blake and DeAndre Jordan. And you had the Rockets with Dwight and James Harden. You had the Spurs with Aldridge, adding Aldridge to Kawhi, and they had Duncan for the first year. I believe he was still there. Then you got the Rockets now with James Harden and Chris Paul. You have the Golden State Warriors now that added KD. Minnesota added Jimmy Butler, along with a couple of smaller players, but they also have Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins. Oklahoma City that added Paul George and Carmelo. The Pelicans picked up Boogie Cousins. The Celtics thought they were going to have one this year with Hayward. Unfortunately, went down with the injury, but they had added Hayward and they added Kyrie. And like I said, those are just the teams off the top of my head. But my point is, the one team I didn't mention is the Cleveland Cavaliers. And this is the overall point that I wanted to make to everyone. The one team that didn't add anyone was the Cavaliers. They are the only contender that actually took a step backwards. Now, the gap between them and anyone else in the East was enormous, but they took a step backwards. And LeBron is certainly playing at an all-time great level, but he isn't getting any younger, right? And again, looking at the landscape of the league, what happens if and when Gordon, and I don't think he's coming back this year. Some people still seem to believe that he is. I don't think that is the case, but let's just say hypothetically, what if he comes back this year? He's definitely going to be back next year. The Celtics are not going to be someone to be messed with. I firmly believe if they did have a healthy Gordon Hayward, they would beat the Cavaliers this year. I still think they have a very, very slim chance of beating them, but I don't foresee that being the case. But what if the Lakers get 2 stars? And one of those stars could be LeBron James, but assuming that it's not, they have the cap room to sign 2 stars. What if they get 2 stars? That young team with 2 veteran superstars could be very, very viable. What if the Raptors get better or they get another superstar? What if Oklahoma City turns out just fine? What if Golden State actually does just keep right on rolling with KD? What if Houston gets another star? Minnesota, New Orleans, Miami has shown the ability to acquire big-name free agents. The Spurs, if they can figure out their business, what if they are able to land someone else, maybe draft someone or make a couple trades? The Wizards, what if they acquire another star? LeBron James is the influencer or author, if you will, of player mobility and maximizing your potential to win a title. And the problem, I think, is that he is so great that teams are now forced to do this in order to compete. And some of them still can't, right? Take Toronto in their last game last night, for example. But my overall thing is it's very possible that LeBron doesn't win another title ever again. And they would get rolled by Golden State if they met this year in the finals. The Rockets' window is open realistically for the next 3 or 5 years. They can't beat the Rockets. And the way their team is set up as far as their contracts that they have on the books and who they can and can't acquire, the Cavaliers can't necessarily make any moves to put them over the edge. Obviously not this year, but for the next couple of years, I don't imagine. And so if you look at the teams that he might go to, the Lakers could acquire 2 max players, one of which would be or could be LeBron himself. But does that put them over Golden State? Maybe in a year or 2, but again, LeBron's human, at least we believe so, and who knows if he'll be playing at the same level in 2 years. We have every right and we have precedence to believe that he will, but we don't know. Minnesota is a viable team, and they'll only get better with time. San Antonio is always in the mix, and he could go to San Antonio, but again, that is part of the problem. Right, he's not beating any of these teams as a Cavalier, but the other issue is he also can't join some of these teams in the eyes of some analysts or fans because some people believe it taints his legacy. He's a mercenary. He plays with the best team. He has to stack the deck in his favor in order to win. So what does he do if he keeps losing in the finals? I'm sorry, but 3-7, 3-8, 3-9 in the finals just doesn't fly for most people. Winning a title as a member of the Warriors, if you were to join them, that's been thrown around. Or as a Rocket, that's also been thrown around. Will certainly create or put an asterisk next to that championship for a lot of people. Personally, I don't care. For me, I say work smarter, not harder. So you go for it if that's what he wants to do. I don't think anyone will, in the long term, hold that against him. We all know how great he is. But in the moment, some people will kill him for that. So what if he does finish his career at, I don't know, call it 20 years and say 3-8 in the finals? 3 rings in 20 years is not, to me, where he should end up for him to be as great as he is. LeBron James is so great that it works against him, and that's my overall point. It's a monster that he created. He initiated this player mobility movement. He went to a team in order to make it the best that he could to maximize his potential for winning, rather than taking on more and doing more as a player that you really shouldn't have to, right? Everyone needs help, and it shouldn't be looked at as a negative thing. No one has ever won the championship by themselves. But it was never this volatile as far as player movement. Every year, both in the summer and at the trade deadline, it's like the next, it's like the season finale of some great show. Like, you have to know who's going to be going where, and it's almost expected, right? We talk about these things a year, 2 years out. We've been talking about the Lakers in 2018 and 2019 free agency for the last year or two, right? People have been talking about Klay Thompson leaving for 2 or 3 years. People have been talking about LeBron James potentially leaving for 2 or 3 years. It's a monster that they created, that LeBron himself created, by being sort of the influencer or the ambassador of player movement. And the league has caught up to him. They're using his own method against him, and now the league is winning. And that's why I think it's very possible that the very thing that he created could be the very thing that sort of takes his legacy down a couple of notches, right? It sort of reminds me of Kobe Bryant. And I said this in another video, how him and LeBron are a lot more alike than people like to think. But what was the demise of Kobe other than injuries? But as far as on the court, his ultimate demise was his, at least what appeared to others, be an inability to play with other players. And as he got older in his career, he still thought at year 18, 19, and 20, he could do it on his own. And he couldn't. And he looked like a shell of himself at the end of his career. And LeBron James is sort of facing the same thing. It's like he went through, he created these teams in order to help himself win. And now teams are creating better teams than the ones he could create. And also players are leaving him in order to do what he did. And it's backfiring against him. Like I said, there's a possibility he doesn't win another title. So that's it. That's the point I wanted to make. I know a lot of people thought it was going to be super negative, but it's not. I just think it's a reality. The very thing that he made is the very thing that could halt his legacy right where it stands. And, it's a catch-22, I guess. You got to, take the good with the bad. So that's it. That's all I got to say. I don't know. It's something I've just been thinking about. It's just one of those things that I went, aha, It's like, this is something that he did, something that he made, something he created, and now it's destroying him. And there's really nothing he can do about it because it's his Frankenstein. So tomorrow, going to talk about possibly some NFL stuff. Maybe. We'll see how much time I get. But I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.